Caracas, Venezuela, on September 11, 2025, Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro closed the United Socialist Party of Venezuela, PSUV Congress, with a fiery and defiant message directed at both his supporters and perceived adversaries abroad. Standing flanked by key party leaders, Maduro addressed the gathered crowd with a mixture of urgency and conviction, warning that Venezuela must be prepared for every scenario, including open confrontation with the United States if provoked militarily. The Congress, attended by senior officials such as Diosdado Cabello, Vice President of the party and Minister of the Interior, Justice and Peace, and Jorge Rodríguez, President of the National Assembly, served as both a symbolic display of unity and a platform for Maduro to sharpen his rhetoric against Washington. Supporters filled the hall with chants and slogans, waving banners and raising their fists in solidarity as the president walked onto the stage. From the very start, Maduro left no doubt about his stance. He framed the PSUV not merely as a ruling party, but as the backbone of Venezuela's revolutionary movement and its ultimate line of defense against foreign aggression. With deliberate words, he issued one of the most striking statements of the night. Nicolás Maduro said, "The United Socialist Party of Venezuela, as the leader of the Bolivarian Revolution, as the ruling party, as the unifier of political, social and cultural forces, must prepare itself to adapt quickly and effectively to move from non-armed forms of fighting to armed forms of fighting if Venezuela is attacked militarily by US imperialism, without hesitation, for hesitation is treason." The words hung heavy in the air, carrying both the defiance of a leader under siege and the gravity of a man preparing his people for the worst. To the thousands listening inside the hall, it was not just political theatre, it was a call to discipline, readiness, and unwavering loyalty. Throughout his speech, Maduro consistently framed the United States as the primary threat to Venezuela's sovereignty. He characterized Washington's foreign policy as imperialist, accusing it of plotting invasions and orchestrating economic warfare against Caracas. In doing so, Maduro attempted to reinforce the image of Venezuela as a nation under siege, where unity was not only desirable but essential for survival. He warned that the nation's enemies were not just abstract forces, but real powers willing to deploy military aggression to subjugate the Bolivarian project. Maduro then pivoted to the issue of loyalty, drawing a stark line between those who would support foreign intervention and those committed to defending Venezuela. His words were both a rallying cry and a warning. Nicolás Maduro declared, "Let everyone define themselves. Those who call for invasion should take to the streets and demand it, and those of us who will defend the homeland to the streets, to the charge, to victory. We must prepare ourselves with maximum unity, maximum strength, and maximum readiness without hesitation." The passage underscored Maduro's desire to portray the internal political divide as a matter of patriotism versus betrayal. By suggesting that hesitation amounted to treason, he signaled that wavering within his own movement or the wider Venezuelan population would not be tolerated. The PSUV Congress itself, staged with images of revolutionary figures and slogans, was designed to reaffirm the party's role as the guardian of Venezuela's socialist model. Maduro stressed the importance of organizational discipline, noting that the ability of the PSUV to adapt quickly could determine the nation's survival in the face of external threats. His insistence on transitioning, if necessary, from political struggle to armed resistance echoed Venezuela's revolutionary tradition, while projecting a readiness to escalate in ways that would alarm both domestic critics and international observers. The atmosphere inside the Congress Hall was charged with energy. Attendees erupted into chants at several moments during the speech, their voices rising in synchronized calls of support for Maduro. The wide shots of the audience showed a sea of red shirts and banners, the traditional colors of the Bolivarian movement, waving as slogans filled the air. Senior figures like Diosdado Cabello nodded in visible agreement during Maduro's remarks, reinforcing the message that the leadership of the PSUV was united in both strategy and resolve. Jorge Rodríguez, another influential figure in the government, joined the chorus of applause, further demonstrating institutional solidarity behind the president's stance. Maduro's choice of timing was deliberate. The speech came amid heightened tensions with the United States, whose officials had criticized Caracas for its human rights record and ongoing political repression. Economic sanctions remained a persistent burden, deepening Venezuela's financial crisis and fueling shortages. Against this backdrop, Maduro sought to transform vulnerability into strength by portraying Venezuela as a revolutionary fortress ready to resist any imperial assault. His rhetoric emphasized not just survival, but victory, tapping into nationalist pride and the enduring Bolivarian narrative of resistance to colonialism and foreign domination. What distinguished this address from previous speeches was the level of directness. While Maduro has long accused the US of plotting against his government, the explicit call to shift from non-armed forms of fighting to armed forms of fighting represented an escalation in tone. By making such statements at a formal party congress, Maduro effectively institutionalized the idea that armed resistance was not only possible, but expected under certain circumstances. The clarity of his language left little room for interpretation. Hesitation was not an option, and readiness for armed struggle was a duty. Beyond the leadership, Maduro's words were also aimed squarely at the party's base. The PSUV has long depended on neighbourhood committees, social organisations and grassroots activists to maintain its hold on power. By emphasising discipline and unity, Maduro was reminding these groups of their role in any potential confrontation. The emphasis on maximum preparation also suggested that, in the government's view, threats were not hypothetical. The framing of those who call for invasion versus those who will defend the homeland reinforced the narrative of an imminent choice that every Venezuelan must make. For international observers, Maduro's speech raised concerns about the potential militarization of Venezuela's political crisis. By explicitly stating readiness for armed confrontation with the United States, Caracas positioned itself on a collision course with Washington. Such rhetoric could further isolate Venezuela diplomatically, but it might also solidify alliances with other governments sympathetic to its anti-imperialist message. Nations like Russia, China and Iran, which have maintained varying degrees of support for Maduro, may interpret the speech as a reaffirmation of Caracas's defiance and resolve. The closing ceremony of the PSUV Congress was as much a show of power as it was a political message. Maduro's presence alongside party heavyweights signalled unity at the top, while the chanting crowd underscored the loyalty of the grassroots. The president's words, however, carried an unmistakable warning. His insistence that hesitation equates to treason, his direct challenge to those calling for US intervention, and his promise of armed resistance if necessary all combined to create a narrative of defiance and readiness. For Maduro, the moment was about more than just rhetoric. It was about preparing his party, his supporters, and perhaps the nation at large for a future that could demand sacrifices and confrontation. As Nicolás Maduro warned, without hesitation, for hesitation is treason. And with that, the PSUV Congress closed not in quiet reflection, but with a resounding call to arms, echoing through the halls of Caracas and into the uncertain future of Venezuela's revolution.
Reimpulsando la nación, justicia y revolución, por América Latina, convencible voz de Dios, un compromiso, un corazón, chavista, militante, el PSUV, con Chávez y con Maduro, viviremos y veremos. Alerta, alerta, alerta que camina, Chávez y Bolívar por América Latina, PSUV. En revolución somos presentes, en gran mañana. Si se prende un peo con Maduro de recreo, si se prende un peo con Maduro de recreo.
The United Socialist Party of Venezuela, as the leader of the Bolivarian Revolution, as the ruling party, as the unifier of political, social and cultural forces, must prepare itself to adapt quickly and effectively to move from non-armed forms of fighting to armed forms of fighting if Venezuela is attacked militarily by US imperialism, without hesitation, for hesitation is treason.
Para pasar de las formas de lucha no armada a las formas de lucha armada si Venezuela es agredida militarmente por el imperialismo norteamericano. Sin vacilación. Dudar es traición. sin vacilación.
Let everyone define themselves. Those who call for invasion should take to the streets and demand it. And those of us who will defend the homeland, to the streets, to the charge, to victory, we must prepare ourselves with maximum unity, maximum strength, and maximum readiness without hesitation.
Ante la máxima presión, máxima unión, máxima preparación, sin vacilación. Dudar